President Trump has shown America one thing that works that we might really wish didn't. That his populist playbook is highly effective for a certain kind of campaigning. But this week he hit a snag. On his biggest issue, the drive for mass deportations, he has suddenly crashed hard into reality, and it's forced a major policy shift. It's being done as quietly as possible, but it's very much worth looking at, because it indicates the limit of an approach that wins support only because it's based on fantasy. And at the end of the video, we'll talk about how difficult it remains for Trump's opponents to turn that limit for him into a real campaign weapon for them. Difficult, but maybe not impossible. Now, at the time of shooting this video, the US is heading into a day with a great big military parade in it, barring bad weather, and with lots of protests countrywide about Trump's immigration push and his extension of the power of the executive to be somewhat king-like. Why the obsession with a military parade, you might ask? Well, such a parade exists to tell the world a story. Conventionally, it would be a story about the scale and the caliber of the country's armed forces, a story about maybe heroic sacrifice in recent history. Whether that's the intended story this time, well, we'll get to see. But the reason why Trump wanted it so badly is that his entire playbook depends fundamentally on storytelling. If I were to break down that playbook into its essential components, my starter would be that it consists of 1. Polarize, 2. Demonize, and 3. Dramatize. So let's take an actual genuine problem, illegal immigration. The details matter, but it is seen as a problem to some degree by everyone. Handling the problem is something that every administration has done. President Obama deported plenty of illegal immigrants, more than Trump, in fact, so far. So that's true, but it's not very powerful. Then you turn to the Trump playbook. Polarize. You allege that actually it's not that Democrats have failed to bring the numbers to zero, it's that they're encouraging illegal immigration in the belief that all those people will vote, and they will vote for them. Demonize. You claim that a large percentage of those illegal immigrants are, quote, murderers and rapists. All the countries are sending America their worst of the very worst people to get them out of their own country. And not only that, but they're eating the pets, the cats and the dogs. I mean, it's a lie, obviously, but it's a remarkable lie that grabs the attention and kind of touches the disgust reflex in a visceral way. So then, having politicised the issue and demonised the people at the heart of it, you have public demand for the dramatisation. You carry out high-profile, heavy-handed actions to tackle this built-up problem in the most compelling way possible. The heavy-handedness provokes responses, protests, lots of coverage and noise, and all of that serves your purpose, because it conveys the message that serious action is being taken, even after all the details have been forgotten. And the simplistic defences work just fine. If you're against us clearing up the murderers and the rapists, then it must be because you want them in the country, because you expected them to vote for you or something. Because obviously, that's the only possible explanation. You're pro-murderer and against normal Americans. And so it is that Trump could send in the military, breaking all sorts of traditional constraints on executive power, and the half population who had accepted the first 2 premises of the playbook, they largely cheered, because it seemed a fitting level of action for the sense of emergency that they'd been seduced by. And so it is as well that Trump could arrest people carelessly even, send them to a completely evil gulag in El Salvador, even scoop up apparently innocent people in the process, because all you need to know is that they're in the US illegally to know that they must really be murderers and rapists and pet eaters. One problem for Trump is that while that story is immensely powerful and compelling, It would be undermined if his administration didn't deport at least a token number of more immigrants than Biden or Obama did. Hence, Stephen Miller sets a target of 3,000 to be picked up every day. Gotta hit those numbers. That creates the second and bigger problem for Trump, because his fantasy world, where illegal immigrants are all, or at least mostly, terrible human beings here to exploit America's goodwill, it's not actually what the world looks like at all. So when you take actions in line with the fantasy, sooner or later you're going to bump pretty hard into reality. Because reality's kind of like that. It doesn't just go away, and it doesn't keep quiet. If only reality could be arrested and deported. So in order to hit the numbers, ICE got into raiding good American businesses, scooping up people who happened to be there regardless of who they were, how many children depended on them, and what they'd done with their lives. Having declared that they would definitely be going after the worst of the worst, capital W, the truth is that their numbers would be pitiful if that was actually true. So he just went to wherever they thought they could find the biggest numbers, farms, restaurants, anywhere you get relatively low-priced labour will do, and as a result, they started devastating some of those businesses. And some of them clearly managed to convey their dismay and alarm back to the man with the parade. Because just yesterday he posted on his social media platform, "Our great farmers and people in the hotel and leisure businesses have been stating that our very aggressive policy on immigration is taking very good long-time workers away from them, with those jobs being almost impossible to replace." Say what? Now, did an actual truth get posted by accident onto so-called Truth Social? A glitch in the matrix indeed. But normal service was quickly resumed. He continued, "In many cases, the criminals allowed into our country by the very stupid Biden open borders policy are applying for those jobs. This is not good. We must protect our farmers, but get the criminals out of the USA. Changes are coming." It's puzzling to work out the logic of that statement. Probably not worth a lot of anyone's time to actually try to do so. Basically, he's saying, okay, some immigrants are good long-time workers, but those jobs are also applied for by desperate criminals, because everyone knows that gang members love nothing more than waiting tables or picking strawberries. So he's saying more focus on the actual criminals, while not admitting that the entire premise of his policy might be based on a huge exaggeration. I mean, look, obviously some illegal immigrants are genuinely the worst of the worst, just like some native-born people and, I don't know, some politicians even, billionaires maybe. But the populist playbook is premised on a majority, and that they are so despicable that they should be dehumanized, and nobody should object if they're not given that tedious old thing that some people call due process. So that was Trump's post, and he promised changes are coming. Well, he promises a lot of stuff and never happens, but it turned out that in this case, a change really has happened. Because it turned out that ICE have been instructed, as a result of that Trump tweet, to stop indiscriminate raids against those various sectors. This came to light thanks to the leak of an internal email, which was then confirmed by the department itself to journalists. The email came from ICE official Tatum King, was sent to all regional leaders within the organisation, and it said this: "Effective today, please hold on all worksite enforcement investigations/operations on agriculture, including aquaculture and meat packing plants, restaurants and operating hotels. Investigations involving actual crimes such as human trafficking, money laundering and drug smuggling, that sort of thing should continue, but not what he described as non-criminal collaterals," which is a nice dehumanized phrase if I ever heard one. That to one side, this is a reality collision moment. If a majority of illegal immigrants are despicable criminals, then, well, they should still be able to hit those numbers in spite of this change, you would expect. Since they're not, de facto, you won't hit those numbers. And that will be quite embarrassing. I mean, it would be if you retained the capacity for embarrassment. In fact, you'll probably do less well than those previous administrations, on account of the fact that you fired most of the competent people on the grounds that they wouldn't sign up to some stupid Trump loyalty test. Incidentally, you can see these elements at play in the tragic farce that's been unfolding around Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So long as it seemed that he might be an innocent man, not a gang member, just trying to live his life, well, they didn't acknowledge him at all. They wanted to brush it under the carpet. They were determined he would never set foot on US territory ever again. But the minute they thought that they had a negative story to tell about him, rightly or wrongly, because again, not hugely competent people, but nevertheless a story that fitted the anti-immigrant mythology they've been building, he was straight back into the US to stand trial, so that story could be gleefully told day after day. The problem is, while it's great that policy founded on disinformation and lies eventually hits the wall of its own hubris, doesn't stop it from being great campaigning for populists anyway. Probably half the American people, or approaching that, will continue to believe that illegal immigration is a huge problem for the country and that Trump is strong on the issue in ways that no one else is. Because the theatre works, even after "they're eating the cats and the dogs" has been exposed as absurd nonsense, it remains compelling, it sticks in the mind. Even after the pictures of seriously evil people that have been shared have been shown to be highly unrepresentative of the whole of the immigrant population, the image of those unlovely faces stick in the mind nonetheless. And Trump's phrase, "an army of illegal alien gang members and migrant criminals from the dungeons of the third world." It's highly visual, it's evocative, it sticks in the mind. Human beings are deeply suggestible. And the truth is that we're in a time, with social media side by side with the divergence of how people get their news, when our understanding of reality has become, as we said before, extremely different. And as Charlie Warsall wrote yesterday in The Atlantic, we don't view big news events on a broad timeline of accurate information, even though we have access to more actual documentary evidence than we've ever had before. Instead, very specifically curated clips of viral moments get spread in different echo chambers. Like I discussed with the LA protest a couple of days ago, one group gets to see an ICE officer shooting a plastic bullet directly at a television correspondent and hitting them. The other group gets to see burning Waymos and masked people waving Mexican flags in front of them. Those clips get shared over and over and over again. Different angles of the same event emerge and get shared as well. And the power of repetition is such that you assume those events are far more common, far more representative than they actually were. And yet, simply pointing out that fact doesn't help. It's not a compelling element of the story. And besides, the other side have even managed to weaponize those claims to make them part of their story against you. So most of the demonstrations have had large numbers of people who were, yes, genuinely peacefully protesting. Now, there's nothing viral about that. Hence, you don't see much of it. The people watching one of the two movies have been under the impression that the whole of Los Angeles is, on the contrary, a war zone. That of course the military must go in, because the local authorities have clearly lost control. That's the impression given by the administration as they tell the story. It's reinforced by the compellingly powerful visuals being shared over and over again. Now, back in 2020, the media made the mistake of trying to convey what they held to be an important reality or a campaign message or whatever, for whatever reason. They talked about BLM protests being mostly peaceful. And this was while there were significant sized riots going on. Now again, they might have been accurate if you were talking about, I don't know, percentages of people involved or the acreage of land covered by it, but it came across as gaslighting. The notorious, on one side, notorious clip of the CNN correspondent framed by dramatic fire behind him alongside the caption, "Fiery but mostly peaceful." So it became a "the media always lies" moment, and it became "the media's campaigning for one side" moment, and there was enough truth in those statements to make them stick. So now we have a legacy of that. I mean, it's not as though this tendency was invented by Trump. It's always been the case that if you organise a demonstration, then it will be the most aberrant thing that gets all the attention. That's not specific to one side. If there's violence, however unrepresentative the group carrying it out might be, that will get attention. If there's none of that, then you will default down to the next level. If there's a single group that decided to come dressed up in the most extraordinary, outlandish clothes possible, they will get attention. Standard human psychology. We give our attention to what is remarkable, not to what is standard. And that is why the Trump populist playbook works in the powerful, destructive way that it does. It polarizes into extremes. Extremes are, by definition, remarkable. It dehumanizes the other side, points to what is aberrant and alien, and then it creates the most dramatic payoff that can be delivered. Now, both sides try to do that last bit. You'll find all sorts of video clips purporting to show X destroying Y with facts and logic or whatever. But it's the Trump populists who have turned it into an art form for authoritarian government. And Democrats and other anti-Trumpists are struggling with this, because the way they do it has a trap for them built right into it. If you downplay the violence that happens at a demonstration, it looks like you're justifying or excusing it. On the other hand, if you do the opposite, if you condemn it loudly and give it huge weight, then you potentially validate the other side's narrative that this was all that happened that was of any interest. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So when you see articles about how Democrats are worrying about associating themselves too much with the No Kings protest taking place as I'm shooting this video, worrying because the association with the BLM riots, the defund the police moment, was weaponized against them so powerfully by the other side. And when you see articles about Democrats desperately looking for how to redefine themselves in this, let's face it, completely changed political landscape, bear all of this in mind, because they do face a real dilemma. You have a compelling narrative that's been constructed against you, and you probably can't avoid it, given how your fragmented media landscape works. So how can you navigate that without resorting to the same corrosive playbook that just brings you into a further downward spiral? And secondly, yes, your society is genuinely right now in a crisis of democracy, but the other side have shown that their compelling storytelling based on ugly fantasies is way more powerful than you pointing at the mechanics of that democratic crisis, which is one reason why the No Kings theme won't cut through. My perspective on it is that you would want to start with why Donald Trump quietly backtracked on his immigration crusade, as we've covered in this video. He did so because some powerful counter-stories were emerging into his own eye line, that of the good American businesses struggling because reliable, hard-working people were being caught up in the web. It betrayed a basic sense of fairness. Everyone had human stories of people who deserved better, and it was demonstrably harmful to America's interests. Those are three powerful components for a good story. Trump recognised that and immediately sought to defuse the issue. But for MAGA the movement and MAGA policy, the cruelty is often a feature, not a bug. And it's impossible for those elements to be stripped out. What Trump has just exposed is that his operation is vulnerable if only his opponents can find the counter to his playbook. Now, as a starter for 10, I'd say you flip 2 parts and keep 1. Rather than polarize, demonize and dramatize, I would say you unify, you humanize and dramatize. Since the first two work perfectly well on the basis of what is true rather than what is imaginary, that should make them more robust, and the dramatization part becomes a force for good, not the corrosive, destructive force that it is right now. So I offer that, just a thought, on a day where military strutting and loud but hopefully mostly peaceful protesting will be the theme of the moment.